Aaron Appelhans grew up near Denver and earned a BS in civil engineering in 2003 from the University of Wyoming. His wife was a fellow engineering student at UW. They were married in Laramie in 2004, where they have raised their 3 children. Aaron became an admissions counselor before joining the UW Police Department as a patrol officer in 2010 and rising to become a patrol sergeant after 5 years. Not coming from a small town, he quickly became accustomed to the benefits of small town living, like being able to meet his neighbors and go where everybody knows your name. There's not much anonymity of law enforcement officers in Laramie. Aaron also found pleasure and fulfillment in participating in and coaching kids in city recreation sports leagues, attending kids' school plays, concerts and recitals, and enjoying outdoor activities. When he has time, Aaron still enjoys a game of pickup basketball, along with golfing and fishing in the summer, hiking and hunting in the fall, skiing in hot springs in the winter, traveling and gaming in the spring. Now, I said when he has time, because after the previous Albany County Sheriff resigned in 2020 amidst controversy concerning the shooting of an unarmed man, Aaron was appointed to that office. He won election in 2022, and as the Sheriff of Albany County, he began to turn around, I think, what can be fairly called a troubled department. Sheriff Appelhans fired or ousted several problematic officers, started hiring more women and minorities, and pushed for more mental health training for his deputies. And if that wasn't sufficiently challenging, I should note 2 further critical factors, one personal, one political. That is, Aaron is the first Black sheriff in the 5th whitest state in the nation. In addition, a man who is looking for challenges, he is one of only 2 Democrat sheriffs in the country's most Republican state. Both of these features add to the challenges and opportunities that he'll explore with us this evening. Sheriff Appelhans.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sheriff Aaron Appelhans. Thank you for having me come and speak with your group tonight. So, I'll keep it fairly kind of light and loose for the most part. I didn't write a speech or a script or anything. Didn't really want to do that to any of you guys tonight. But I will just kind of go over maybe for about the next 20 minutes to half hour, just kind of my story, how I got into the position, some of the things I've had to deal with being in the position and what we're looking at kind of moving forward. And then we'll leave it open really for any questions that you guys have. We'll have a AMA is what we call it. Ask me anything, really. So, like Jeff said, I grew up in Denver, moved around in Denver a lot, but ended up being in Westminster, graduating from high school. And at that time, my parents were like, you know what, you're doing really good. You could be anything you want to be. You could go to any school you want to. You just have to pay for it. So I decided to go to the University of Wyoming. One, because it was far enough away and it was close enough to home, and for the most part it was cheap. So cheapest school I could find. So went to the University of Wyoming. Like I said, I studied civil engineering at the time. I really wasn't looking to get into law enforcement or be a law enforcement officer. Worked for engineering, worked for the city of Westminster. Also worked for Peter Kiewit and Sons. So any of you guys that shake your fist at some of the road construction stuff that happens, especially around kind of central and southeast Denver 20 years ago, that was me. So you're welcome, and I'm sorry at the same time. So I worked in decided that I didn't really like engineering for a couple of different reasons. I found out that city and county governments, when it comes to contracting work, is not the most ethical business to be in. And so that really wasn't for me. So I also met my wife at the time, and Colorado wasn't for her. So stayed in Wyoming, where we raised our family. And I started working in admissions, which was basically marketing, business management, and recruiting students to go to college. So my personal jobs that I had in there was really focusing on bringing more first generation students and underrepresented populations to the University of Wyoming. And like Jeff pointed out, the University of Wyoming is not the most diverse place you can be. It's fairly homogeneous, which is what I usually tell most people, which is the nice way of saying that there's a lot of the same people located in one area. So, but I definitely did that for a while, traveled all across the United States, and really made more of a focus on inner city students, and also working with our local native tribes that we had within the state of Wyoming. So Northern Arapaho and the Shoshone, up there at the Wind River Reservation. So, and as I was working there, the University of Wyoming got a new police chief at the time, and he was really looking to take the department kind of in a new direction. And so he had heard about me, and he comes to my office, and he was like, hey, I think you would be good in law enforcement. I would like you to come to the University of Wyoming Police Department. And the first thing that kind of came out of my mouth at the time was that I hate cops. And so he's like, I get it. But he explained to me, he's like, you know what, we're really trying to change things around, and it's easier for me to train somebody to become an officer who can already talk to people and problem solve than it is for me to try and teach people how to talk to people and problem solve. And so I made him a promise. I was like, you know what, I still hate cops. But if things start to go south with the job that I'm in, I'll promise you I'll give you a look. So 2 years later, things started to go south in the job that I had. We had some turnover in the upper divisions. And if any of you guys have worked a J job, you know that it's excruciatingly hard to go to work every day when you have a bad boss. And so I decided to make that transition over to the University of Wyoming Police Department. I got hired really for one reason, and one reason only, at that time, was to be what we called a community service officer at that time. And kind of like I was explaining, we were really trying to transition that time of, instead of being a reactive police department, being a proactive police department. And what we learned through a lot of other studies and some trial and error is that if you want to be a proactive police department, you got to do two things. You got to not only enforce the laws of the community that you serve, but you also need to educate the population on what those expectations of behavior is. And so we really moved towards a different model of, not just telling people what those expectations are, but being more realistic with it. We have nothing but social, sociology studies, psychology studies, anthropology studies that says whenever you're trying to tell a group of people what those expectations of the behavior is, one of the worst ways to do it is to say, don't do it. Abstinence doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. So we really started to change our messaging, where we said, okay, so here's those expectations. Here's what you shouldn't do. Here's the reasons why you shouldn't do it. And this is why it's illegal. Here's the consequences of it. But since we already kind of know you're not going to listen to that as much, here's what you can do to kind of stay out of jail. For the most part, if you're going to do it, especially at a college campus, A lot of it is focused on alcohol. Alcohol was our number one crime and filtered into all of the other crimes that we had to deal with as well. Especially in the state of Wyoming, very, 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 very high alcoholic consumption in Wyoming. We said, this is how you can consume alcohol responsibly and stay out of trouble. So we did that. And it really, really started to take off. While I was there, moved through the ranks, I ended up being a sergeant. I started as a detective, which is the position I always really wanted to be as well. And being a detective at a college campus, it's a very small town. We got about 10,000 students. My jurisdiction's about 3 square miles, which is about 15 blocks each way. On there as well, but there's a ton of things that you had to deal with. So it's a very small department that I worked in, so it's only about 15 sworn officers. So when I got moved over to sergeant, promoted to sergeant, it really wasn't just a sergeant. I was the admin lieutenant and the evidence tech and a dispatch supervisor and our security guard supervisor and building security manager for the campus, lots of different things. Program manager for all of our open air events, which is Division I football for 6 weeks during the fall. For those of you guys that don't know, Wyoming does not have a professional sport, and it only has one 4-year college in the entire state. So it's not like Colorado where you're split between I'll talk a little trash here, which team is going to be worse, whether you're a Colorado State Ram, which is terrible, or a CU Buff, which is equally awful. Or if you want to serve your country, or if you want to serve your country and losing like the Air Force Falcons do fairly regularly for my Colorado Springs people, or DU or any of the other states. We only have one, so we call it One Wyoming. So everybody gets behind the Pokes more than anything else. And so that's 29,000 of your best friends, all highly liquored up every Saturday for 6 weeks in the fall to come cheer on the Pokes, win, lose, or draw. So, and I've seen all three. So that's really kind of how I got started. I never really thought to become a sheriff. It was really never a career aspiration for me. I did, as I got a little bit older, was looking to possibly run my own department, but like I said, sheriff was never on the list. In Laramie, unfortunately, our sheriff, what's the best way to describe this? Definitely made some mistakes during his tenure at sheriff, which resulted when I took over in about 3 different federal civil lawsuits going on at the time. Jeff alluded to one, and all of this, you guys can Google, the stories are all out there. One resulted in the death of a unarmed special needs person that was well known in the community on a traffic stop. And so the sheriff resigned because the heat of that lawsuit was on him. And in Wyoming, we don't have special elections. Essentially, if the party, whatever party that person was a part of, if they resign before their term is over, the party then gets to select 3 candidates that they have to move on to the county commissioners, and then the county commissioners will then go ahead and interview those 3 candidates. And so, and then as a side note, if the county commissioners can't make a decision, then it gets punted up to the district court judge, who then gets to start the process all over and make the final determination. So for me going through, it's a pretty non-traditional process. A lot of lawsuits were involved for the 7 months that I had to look to get appointed. So I was chosen as the finalist once in September. Then a lawsuit was filed and the stay was granted by the judge. And then they had a second stage that I had to go through as well. And I made the finalist on that one. Amazingly enough, they kept adding people to the groups that I had to go through. So, and then there was a second lawsuit and then a third group that ended up not actually happening because the crux of the lawsuit is that even though our sheriff wrote that he was going to resign, he was still in office. He said he was going to resign in January. They wanted to start the process early so that there was a transition. And one of the parties of the county commissioners wouldn't allow that to happen. They wanted, they had to have him out right away. So it was very much a historically delayed process. If I'm being honest with you, I kept making field goals, even though the goalposts kept getting moved. So it was good. And then I got appointed in December of 2020. I knew that there were some issues at the time. Our current sheriff wrote a letter to the commissioners and the judge and the party on if the person that he wanted in there didn't get the position, everything was going to go awry, and specifically named me as kind of being the catalyst of all of that, which was kind of rough because I had worked with that sheriff for 10 years and I thought we were on a good relationship. So as an investigator, I've learned that when you start to investigate crimes, two things happen. You will never get 100% of the information that you need for that crime. The perpetrator will always leave that last 2%. They will never tell you 100% of everything. It's a way for that perpetrator to save face in some way, shape, or form. So you never get all of the information that you need. And it was kind of the same going in as the sheriff. And as you're investigating, the rule that I always have is where there's one, there's two, where there's two, there's three. Once you find something, keep digging. There's probably something else there. And once you find the second thing, keep digging because there's probably a third. So when I took over the position, that's what I did. Took those two things where I was like, well, I'm pretty sure they didn't give me all of the information that I needed going in. And the more I started to dig, where there was one, there was two, where there was two, there was three. The story I always tell when I got in there, I was going through that third process and the county commissioners were going to make a selection. And I was the last one to interview and I got done and county commissioners were like, hey, we're going to go to lunch and then we're going to make a decision. Do you want to stick around? And I said, no, I'm going to go eat lunch. It's in your hands. You guys do whatever it is that you need to do. But Jesus, take the wheel on that one. So they called me up and about 45 minutes later, they're like, hey, we're gonna choose you as sheriff. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks. I'm glad. I can't wait. They're like, yeah, we're going to swear you in. And I was like, oh yeah, when's that going to happen? They're like, now. So, I really haven't given 2 weeks to my last job or anything like that. They're like, statutorily, you're sheriff now, so come in and get it done. So I rushed back down to the courthouse and grabbed my family and stuff and get sworn in. The office that I was taking over didn't actually really know that I was getting sworn in. They just gathered a few people at the last second to get to my swearing in. And I get done and I go downstairs. And I was like, well, I should start. I knew most of the people there, but I should start to meet some of them. So the secretary, who's my business manager now at the time, comes up to me. She's like, yeah, okay, well, we're going to need you to sign some paperwork so you can get your check. And just so you know, statutorily, you're only required to work 1 day a month. And I said, okay. I said, since you guys haven't had a sheriff in the last decade, you're probably only telling me that for a couple of reasons. I said, either one, that's the speech you give to every new sheriff that's coming in. Or two, the last guy that was here was only working one day. And everybody just stared. And I said, well, you know, I'm not trying to be that change agent right off the bat, but let's try this on for size. I'm going to work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Let's just do that for a couple of weeks and see how things go. And they didn't get that joke. They literally were perplexed. They were like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to be here to get stuff done. And that was my first inclination of how much cow manure I had literally just jumped into. So I got into the office, and there's just a variety of things. I won't bore you guys tonight with. So the second story I tell everybody is I go into my office, and there's stacks of paper, and I see the first stack. And those are the federal lawsuits. And I knew that those were there. And then I see a picture of the sheriff's wife still on the wall. And I was like, man, you really got to be in a hurry to get out of here. Just leave Mrs. Sheriff hanging there for everybody to see. So that was my second inclination, that I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a lot of work. And then I see a notepad with numbers on it and a calculator with a spool on there. And I remember yelling at my business manager down the hall, what year is it? What's going on around here? And so I took, and I was like, please do not tell me that this is the budget. And she's like, yeah, that's the budget. So, okay. So I took the first 3 weeks, and I started to interview people in the community, and was like, hey, well, what do you like and what don't you like about the sheriff's office? And I got a long list of things that they didn't like and a very short list of things that they did like. And then I started to interview my deputies, every single one of them, being like, what do you like? What don't you like? What are your career goals? What are your plans? All that stuff. And that's where one comes two and two comes three. So, like I said, you can Google all of it there. We definitely had kind of that good old boy culture at our sheriff's office. We had literally 5 people there that ran the whole office and terrorized absolutely everybody that was there. So my first order of business was getting rid of the first guy that was committing every single type of federal labor law violation you could possibly think of. I've never met a guy, that's not true, I've met a few people, but who was equal opportunity in his discrimination. He hated everybody and terrorized absolutely everybody for every reason. It was really, 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 really terrible to hear all of the stories from people, things that you would never, ever think that you would do to a human being. Put him on admin leave. We did an internal investigation, and then he was gone within the first 3 months. And that's probably the second big Google article you'll see on there. You'll see Aaron Appelhans, first Black sheriff in the state of Wyoming, and then Aaron Appelhans fires racist deputy as the first Black sheriff in the state of Wyoming. So yeah, we just dove in head first. So in the first 6 weeks that we were there. So and then it was just a domino effect from there, knowing that one of the big jobs that I had was trying to affect a culture change, both internally and externally. I don't know if you guys notice, since you guys are all mystery writers, I imagine you watch a lot of cop shows, law enforcement shows, investigators, these types of things. I'm going to go out on a limb and think that you probably don't see a lot of cop shows with people who look like me as that main, investigator, as the hero that's going through and doing that. That also translates into real life cop work as well. A whole lot of people looking like me doing some of the things that I'm doing in that position. So, as I've said, ever since I've gotten it, being kind of the first of anything, the first of my kind is what I tell people. It's really important that, you're coming in and you're making the first, middle, and last impression on absolutely everybody you meet. And it's not necessarily fair, and I understand that, that I'm representing not only my department, but my community, my state, and in a lot of ways, my profession, my culture, and everybody who looks like me as well. So one of the big things that I really told a lot of people going in there is like, it's good. You better late than never being the first, but it's really, really important and incumbent upon me to make sure that I hold that door behind me so that a ton of people who look like me or come from different types of circumstances that I came from can follow me. And that's really just as important as being the first. And so really trying to affect that change within my department and my community is everything that I do has that really in mind. That not only am I the first, but I got to make sure that I blaze a good enough trail so that other people can come and follow me as we go. So one of the big things that I really looked at in my department was really trying to tackle 3 types of issues. Recruitment and retention, de-escalation, and then public relations. I've always said law enforcement has been terrible for a lot of years in terms of hiring people. All of the bad case law that we have from law enforcement comes from us. We're the ones that screw things up, and then it has to go to judges, and judges say you can't do that anymore. And so, and I've always linked the 2 together, that recruitment, hiring, and bad case law are linked. You hire bad people, you get a bad product. You get good people, you get good product. So I think the common term is shit in, shit out. So everything that I've done in terms of recruitment, it's one of the 2 things I actually might still micromanage in my department: budget and hirings and terminations on there. I need to be 100% sure that everybody coming through the office that I'm going to pin a star on their chest can do the job that I ask them to do. So, so everything we've done is to be honest, to use business terms, put a better product out there on the street. So, so we looked, like I said, law enforcement hires kind of the same person over and over and over again. And what I've said for years is that when you hire the same person over and over again, 2 things happen. One, you create a culture that's awesome for that same person. So every time you hire Dan, and Dan finds another Dan and finds another Dan and finds another Dan, all the Dans like the same thing that Dan likes. That's not the same for Jill's or Susie's or Bob's or anybody else that's out there. So you can't hire the same person over and over. That's how you build toxic culture. So, and 2, that well is going to run dry. You just keep going to it every time. You want to get more people, you need to cast a wider net. And that's one of the things that we've done. So even in Laramie, Wyoming, which is fairly homogeneous, we don't have to just go to Laramie to get everybody. We can go to a lot of different places. And so we made a priority to hire people from underrepresented populations. So people from minority backgrounds, females, and veterans. Those were kind of the three main groups of people that we were really looking forward to getting on as well. And so when I got onto the department, we had 3 women and 2 minorities, including myself. So since then, we're almost at 50% of female to male, so about 35% in terms of underrepresented populations. The thought behind that is that we don't necessarily get to pick and choose the calls that we get to, or the people that we come across when we go to those calls. We have to be ready for everything at every time. And grabbing people from a lot of different places with a lot of different experiences gives my agency better socially equipped to deal with all of those. Sometimes you're going to go to a call where you just don't understand what the people are saying or where they're coming from, but you might have a deputy that does. So having that as a tool is unmeasurable. It really is. It's the greatest thing ever. So yeah, that was really kind of a bigger thing, which leads into the next thing that we talked about was de-escalation. I do the same thing that the chief that I got hired on. I say the same thing. I can teach you to be a deputy. I can teach you to be a cop all day. I can teach you how to shoot. I can teach you how to wrestle. I can teach you to slap on some cuffs and take them off in a heartbeat. It doesn't take me very long to do that. What I really am not a good teacher at is teaching you how to see those social cues, or how to talk to somebody, or how to reason with somebody, or how to calm somebody down. So since I know that I'm really, really bad at teaching that, I go find people that have those skills already ready to go. So work smarter, not harder. So yeah, now we look at a lot of different places. I love going to, especially since this is a kind of a writing group, I love going to English majors and being like, have you ever thought about a career in law enforcement? English majors are usually pretty good, not only at writing, which is good. About 75% of all law enforcement work requires writing legal documents. So I love that they can spell and write and do all of that on their own. That's fantastic. But those majors usually have people with a lot of good people skills. They're creative as well. So there's no hard and fast rule a lot of the times going to all of these calls, finding a solution for them. Sometimes you have to problem solve on the spot. So like I said, English majors, I love English majors. I love engineers too. So I got to work on engineers with their social skills.
English spelling.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and then like I said, that third thing, getting to the de-escalation, is just that community relations, setting that stage for everybody. I've really taken it upon myself to be kind of that face of the agency. A lot of my deputies do great work and do never want to be in front of the camera on social media. It's a fight we have weekly. Where I tell them I can be the face, but they need to see you guys out there too. And just trying to get them to understand that, it's good for people who identify with me, where I come from with my background, to see me do it. It's equally important for people that you identify with and that the background that you come from, to see other people, or have other people see the work that you do on there as well. And so really trying to kind of build that relationship. And like I said, be community oriented. So I tell people all the time, cops are people too. I wasn't born a cop. So yeah, we're people too. Engage with the community, get out there, meet people. You have a whole range of issues and emotions, just like everybody else does. And it's good that, you know, everybody else can recognize those things as well. So yeah, that's where we're at. So right now, everything is good-ish. So as good as it can be. I'm not working like 80, 90-hour weeks anymore, which is great. So, and we've really gotten our department back to where we can just handle the things that come in and really kind of look forward to, you know, starting new programs. So, you know, when I first got there, after 4 or 5 people left, then another 4 or 5 or 11 or 20 people left. So I had to turn over half of my department within a year. Did so. And continued to keep that train rolling. You know, I'm in almost my 3rd year now, and now we're expanding our department now as well. So, which is fantastic. If you just based on the little bit that I told you guys, if you could see what that office was doing and what it looked like there, you'd think I would be out of my mind 3 years ago saying, "Hey, we're going to expand to like 60 people and do more." So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We'll just open it up for questions.
What was it like when you got in there, started letting people go and cleaned it up? Were you afraid at all for your own safety?
No,
Did you?
I have a little bit of it. I mean, yes and no. I have a little bit of a different constitution. There's a joke out there that says a lot of people, a lot of people live by the hope creed. I hope something doesn't happen. Gosh, I hope everything goes well. I live myself by a wish creed. I wish a mother would. So I'm a little bit more confrontational. I don't really kind of worry about that. Part of the reason why it was so difficult for me to get in, because they knew coming in that I don't necessarily look the other way. I'll make hard decisions if I need to. And if that means that somebody has to leave or go do something else, then so be it. If law enforcement was easy, everybody would do it. But this isn't Target. So there's 1,000 other jobs you can do.
I've never been a cop, but I presume that there are a lot of things first responders see that you can't unsee.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder about PTSD, and I wonder about mental health. And is that, I mean, obviously, if we have a good relationship with the community, there will be less, but still.
We've tackled that on 2 fronts. So mental health with the public and mental health internally with our agency. So we started to notice that about 40% of our calls had a mental illness component with it. And we knew that I've always said 2 things. Law enforcement they're not doctors, they're not counselors, they're not psychologists. We are the worst people to come and try and deal with any of your mental health situations. So we're not going to do it anymore. We're going to go and try and set up different coalitions and services that we can refer you to. We will still respond and make sure that the scene is safe, but we're not going to try and walk you through anything anymore. We're terrible at it. Give it to a counselor or a doctor, somebody who has a degree and an expert in that field and much better at it. So the second thing I said is jail is also terrible for people with mental health issues. It's the worst place for it. Jail is not a hospital. It's not a rehabilitation clinic. None of that stuff. And so what we've really tried to do is change that system in 2 ways, making sure that we don't create a pipeline with people with mental health issues coming into jail. We want to cut that pipeline off, keep them out of jail. So all they do is they come in jail, they get no help, and then they leave. And then they get in trouble again, and then they come in jail, and they get no help, and then they leave. And it's this nasty, nasty circle. So we want to cut that from the outset. Like I said, trying to work myself out of a job. I was saying earlier, I would love it if the community came to me and they're like, "Hey, we spend $2 million on your jail every single year, and you don't have anybody in it. And I'd be like, sweet. All right. That's what we're trying to do. So the second thing is we know that, you know, that's not going to change overnight. That's a systemic change. So we've really instituted more mental health, wellness, mental health clinicians into our jail and our booking system, and really working on trying to create a pipeline to where not only do they get those services in the jail, but once they get out of jail, we can continue those services instead of just kicking them out on the curb and be like, okay, well, deal with it. So humanize it quite a bit more.
In terms of de-escalation and mental health, I assume the department has its canines and its bite dogs.
No,
You don't have any canines.
we have canines. We do not have bite dogs.
Okay,
I made that change immediately.
okay, great. Well, let me ask you the second part of the question.
Yeah.
Do you utilize therapy dogs at all for your staff or as part of going out to scenes with social workers to de-escalate?
Not yet, really. So we're thinking about doing it within our jail. I have a couple deputies, and they're not joking. They want therapy animals, specifically kids. But therapy animals within the jail for both deputies and inmates. And I'm open to it, actually, if we can do it in a controlled environment. But not so much on our end for those calls. And the only reason behind that, I do believe that that's a great way to do things. I don't necessarily believe that that should come from the police department. When you guys don't get to see it right now because I'm in a polo, I'm in golf pants, that type of thing. But when we're on shift, I am in a 45-pound vest with pepper spray, taser, baton, sidearm, badge, medical equipment to save people's lives. I'm not the greatest representation to be like, oh, here's a puppy. A lot of times our presence escalate things. They don't necessarily make it better. And so having those therapy dogs with other professionals in a different environment is much more effective than it is for law enforcement to take that on.
And the reason I was asking is I go to police departments and other first responders with my therapy dog. And for example, the Erie Police Department has their own dog that when they're going out on a call that looks like it's a mental health, they'll bring a person who handles the dog. It seems to help.
Yeah, for those calls I got, I was also talking tonight. Nothing against dispatchers, but the call that we get versus the call that we respond to are very rarely the same. Very rarely do we know that that's a mental health call from the onset. And gosh, when we get those, we thank our lucky stars. We're like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier. So, but a lot of times like I said, we don't know that ahead of time. Just to kind of give you an idea of where we live, we're fairly rural. So my county is about 4,300 square miles. To give you guys an example, that's roughly the size of Delaware. So it'll take us an hour or two to get to some places on there as well. We only have about 38,000 people. So for any of you math whizzes, right off the bat, so it's only a couple hundred people per square. So it's very, very, very rural. So getting some of those services out to those places is difficult. So a lot of the places in my county don't necessarily want that. They don't even want us there.
Well, I don't want to ask too many questions, but do you have jurisdictional issues? I mean, I assume you've got tribal police, you've got.
No, not really. So county sheriff's a little bit easier, at least in the state of Wyoming. My jurisdiction is the entire county. So everything within the county is within my jurisdiction. So, and there's only one law enforcement officer higher than me, and that's the county attorney. So I essentially have jurisdiction. I don't have any tribal lands in my county. I do have United States Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management. Wyoming Highway Patrol, University of Wyoming Police Department, Laramie Police Department as well. So and essentially I'm in charge of all of them. Go ahead.
What's the crime rate in Laramie?
So the crime rate in Laramie and Albany County mimics the crimes that we have in the state of Wyoming. So let's see, I think it's gone down. It used to be 80%. I think it's only about 74% down. 74% of the crime in Wyoming are two crimes, DUI and public intoxication. So when I say heavy alcohol, it's heavy alcohol. And then all of the other crimes that come underneath it usually have alcohol attached to it by one or both of the parties involved. So we average about 9 to 11 homicides in the state of Wyoming per year. Kind of gives you an idea. So homicide's pretty rare. You'll probably die on the road instead of being killed by somebody else. So
You're saying the crime rate's lower than Longmire apparently.
yeah, so in the fictional realm of Absaroka County, it really is like the murder capital of Wyoming. So I know I've been to I have a cousin that lives in Buffalo, and so every time I go there I try and meet up with Chad while he's there. So usually eat Sunday breakfast at the B. So I'm pretty sure that's in I think that's where Longmire has his brunch as well. So.
I'm curious, early on, you said you hated cops.
Yes, very much so.
What changed?
Oh, what changed? The biggest thing for me that changed was that I had the ability to change it. So there's still things about the profession I don't like. So and what's really nice about being in the position that I'm in now is that I have the ability to affect change on those things. So everything that I've kind of talked about stems from that root. For the most part, growing up, I've had families in the criminal justice system, so I've seen it from both ends. I've seen it from a victim standpoint. I've seen it from a perpetrator standpoint. I've seen it from a law enforcement standpoint as well. So, and I really do think that system could work. It needs a lot of changes to do it. So,
Would you encourage your kids to go into law enforcement?
I always say I think that's public service is a really great profession to get into. But I always kind of caution them a little bit. I was like, just know what you're getting into before you do. And it's not necessarily just with law enforcement. I definitely think that the medical field is a public service a job as well. Anything with social services, which you see high burnout in, just let them know that you're going to get into a profession where for the most part, everybody that you come across is in crisis. They're having one of the worst days of their life at that time, and you are there for it. So just know that ahead of the time, Like I said, it's not a profession for everybody. So I really don't go out and say, everybody should go out and be in law enforcement. Everybody should be a deputy. Everybody should go and be a cop. I'm usually quite the opposite. I really do think that we need to be more selective with the type of people that we have there, because the stakes are so high for the people that you're serving in there as well. So. But and as a side note, no, none of my children want to be in law enforcement. So they've all decided to go do other things.
I mentioned in the introduction that I was one of the short stories that I had, one that I'm kind of brainstorming involves the sheriff and another character. But my vision was a relatively small population county. I mean, Laramie is still a fair-sized city. Wyoming's full of counties that don't have a city near that size.
Yeah.
So I was curious about the relationship, and maybe this varies from state to state. You said in your case, you obviously have Laramie police. They have a police department.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually over them?
Yeah, it's kind of statutorily, yeah. But I let them still run independently. Same with the highway patrol and same with the University of Wyoming Police Department. Because to be honest, I got a bunch of other things that I have to deal with. I don't need to manage multiple departments. So, but I do, it is one of those things where I make sure that I have a good relationship with that department and that they also know, you know, my vision for my department, what we do and how they fit into that as well. So
if I have mentioned Colorado, I could put the story in Wyoming, the exact place is critical, but so if it's a small town, I mean, 2,000 people, whatever, they're going to have some, or not necessarily, would the sheriff possibly and deputies take care of all law enforcement?
Yeah, so we have that in some counties.
That's in Wyoming.
Yeah, so like, so just like in Longmire for your fictional one, it's just the sheriff's office that's there. In reality, in Wyoming, like Sublette County, which is kind of on the west end, closer to Utah, doesn't really have any municipalities in it, any municipality police. The sheriff's office takes every call within that county. So yeah, we have those there. So it's usually just some of the larger counties with some of the larger county seats or larger cities in there. We'll have a municipality in there as well.
So if you have a community where you don't have a large municipality, but again, you're talking about a lot of territory, just give me a rough idea maybe of how many deputies might be in a situation like that.
I mean, so we try and go off of kind of that industry standard, and it was given by the FBI years and years ago, to where you have 2 deputies per 1,000 people.
Oh, okay.
So to give you an example, I have about 38,000 people in my county. Right now, I only have 40. I'm only budgeted for 46 sworn deputies. So if you take 38,000 and you multiply that by 2, that comes out to 76. So I'm about 30 short of where I probably should be. So what you have is that situation where, you know, you have a call out in the north end of the county. It takes you an hour to get there. Even driving at 100 miles an hour, you might have 1 deputy respond. If it's a hot call or a dangerous call, you'll have 2, but one's driving 100 miles and the other one's coming from 150 miles in the other direction.
Would state patrol highway come to?
If they're in the area.
If they're in the area.
They're usually not, yeah. Yeah, so we have that happen quite a bit. So we'll be in a remote area where we have to go there, and we'll have 5 different officers show up, usually 2 sheriff's deputy, 1 Forest Service, 1 BLM, another sheriff's deputy from the neighboring county because it was on the county line, that type of thing. So yeah, everybody tries to help each other out because we know, like I said, where we're at is hard to get to.
So is it true you have no jurisdiction on American Indian lands?
That is true, yes.
That's true.
So even if I was in the county, so for Wyoming, that's Fremont County. Sheriff's office has no jurisdiction on federal lands. That's a sovereign nation on there. So tribal lands usually have their own police department. So
Unless it's a homicide, right?
no.
They need to bring in that.
No.
No,
Nope.
For prosecution.
only for press.
Only through prosecution does it go straight to federal court. But Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, will still take that case.
So if you had a Laramie resident that went and committed a crime on Indian land, could you go in?
No,
No.
no, that's Bureau of Indian Affairs would do it. Now, once they left tribal lands and came back home, yeah, they're mine. So, for lack of a better word. So,
Don't
You have additional aid agreement with police
yep,
in other counties too?
yep. All of my surrounding counties, we have mutual.
Do you share radio frequency?
So we have, the way the state is set up is that we don't necessarily share one radio frequency. We have multiple radio frequencies, but we have the ability now to switch to those radio frequencies when we're in those jurisdictions.
Do you have some radio repeating something? Because it gets pretty hilly. Or there's gonna be some big dead spots.
Right. So in my county, I have big dead spots, and it's usually in the real mountainous regions on there as well. But switching your radio channel will then switch your signal to a different tower. And so when we're in kind of those blurry lines between counties and stuff, we're able to switch to different towers and still get our communications. But we rely heavily on radio communications because cell phone communications doesn't work in a lot of the rural areas where we're at.
So given the circumstances and you came into your department, I'm sure you're well aware how like, a lot of departments are like that in this country.
Yeah.
Do you think that the way forward is more people like you getting in and changing it from the inside, or do you think it's more of a needs to change from like the systemic level down, like from a political, like you thought about going into politics to try to change it on an even bigger scale?
Both, to answer kind of both of those questions. I think it's important to see a systemic change from the top down and from the bottom up. The other change that we're really starting to see is that law enforcement are, what's a good way to say it? They like to repeat what they see. So some of the things that we've done are what would be considered in law enforcement like non-traditional. So like we've, to give you an example, we've changed our uniforms to be much more comfortable and much more tactical for our deputies. The reason behind that is because I got tired of paying workman's comp and early medical retirement because somebody has 50 pounds on their waist and they're busting knees and hips and lower backs the whole time. Doesn't make sense to wreck somebody for the rest of their life and injure them to where they can't do the work. We would like them to do the work and then retire. So we've changed that uniform quite a bit, which is not your traditional, blue button up with the white t-shirt underneath and the Batman belt, for lack of a better word, on there. So we're starting to see a lot of our neighboring law enforcement divisions starting to mimic the things that we do. We've taken our vehicles and we've made them, we've changed all the different kind of logos and stickers on there as well to where they're highly, highly reflective. So you can see us. We're not blacking out our vehicles anymore and sitting on the side of the road, State of Colorado Highway Patrol. In case they see this YouTube video. Because we're out there for traffic safety, not traffic apprehension. So our lights are super duper bright because we're out there for traffic safety. The number one killer of cops is traffic accidents. Cops getting hit on the side of the road. So we try and light up those cherries as much as we can so you can see us from miles away. Plow into the back of us. on there as well. We're starting to see our neighbors and a lot of other people mimic that behavior. So a lot of it is not only going out and say, hey, we're going to do this change, but then affecting that change and then having everybody else see it and be like, hey, you know what? We could do that too. So.
Do you think that will carry over into some of the more parts that affect your relationship with the public as well? Because I know, with how highly publicized some of the bad things can be, people may not feel like they can call the police when they need to, and then that makes y'all's jobs harder. So do you see other departments starting to pick up your attitudes toward the public as well?
Yeah, very much so. So we see that on a couple different levels. I've made my attitudes with the public pretty clear. You can't have a department without the public. Every time somebody gets angry and they say they pay your salary, they're not wrong. They do. So it's important to have that relationship with the public. Like I said, that's the community that you're serving as well. So, and then also with the media as well. So I interact with the media somewhat cautiously, and I somewhat set the terms on it. But definitely interacting with the media quite a bit more. We interact with the media a lot. So, and then just getting stuff out on our own. I don't need a newspaper to publish everything that I do. I can do it on my own. So I cut that middleman out a lot of the time. So, because I've noticed in the short term that I'm there that the media has constraints, and they're constraints that I don't necessarily agree with all the time in terms of like word count and space and advertisement space and other things like that. I don't play by those rules. Like either get out the information or don't. So don't pick and choose and cherry pick those things. It actually does more damage. So when I got elected, that's the first thing I said, because transparency was a big deal. And I said, yeah, I've learned, I'm cutting out the middleman. So I don't need the media. I can put out stuff on my own. There's enough channels and technology to get it out without having to use a newspaper or a media outlet.
What do you think we writers get wrong the most? What would you like to see us do a better job at?
Two things. I do. I've said this to my local media. If you're going to run a story, don't constrain yourself for the most part. Your story does not have to be 150 words. I don't know why you guys I'm sorry that I'm generalizing, but I don't know why they put those constraints on you. You got a whole newspaper.
I'm thinking more of fiction writers.
Oh, for fiction writers? Well, so you don't have some of the constraints of yeah.
You can go a little.
Write it out. Don't again, same thing. Don't constrain yourself, to fit it into some. I know a lot of you guys said that you write short stories, and I'm kind of ignorant. I don't know how short or how long a short story is, or if there's a rubric that says that once you get so many words or so many pages, it's no longer a short story, it's a long think piece or something like that. But don't constrain yourself with that. The people who are consuming your media will consume it regardless. I'm imagining everybody in here has read a ton of books in their lifetime. Were all of them the same size? No. And does it make it less enjoyable or more enjoyable depending on the size? No, it's the content that's in there. So don't constrain yourself on the size. And that's the second thing that I'm going to go into. Don't necessarily restrain yourself on the content. And so most writers, I see them do this unconsciously, where they'll start to write things that they don't necessarily know about. and it starts to poke holes in your plots, and people say, oh, there's no way that that can happen, or that's not the way it works, or those types of things as well. So really just kind of do your research, especially if you're doing any type of writing within the criminal justice system. You know, our criminal justice system is one of those things. I guess one of the knock that I have on it is when you're in it, you understand how it works. If you're not in it, it's hard to understand how it works. Find somebody in it and figure out how it works. There's all kinds of loopholes and different things and reasons why they do the things that they do on there. So definitely try and find somebody in law enforcement, pull them aside. If it's a cop, you know, take them for donuts and coffee. Don't call them donuts though. We take that personally. I call them power rings. So it's much easier to swallow a power ring than it is a donuts.
Kind of a silly question. Do you have a favorite cop show?
Law and Order used to be kind of my favorite cop show for a while, just for a short period. So I used to the break that I had in college, I always gave myself a break between like 10 and 1. And so I'd work out, I'd go to college, I'd come home and I would watch The Price is Right because I love The Price is Right. I don't know why anybody could blame me for that. And then like Law and Order reruns would start like at noon. So and I really liked that show because you know, in the later seasons and all the spinoffs started jumping the shark on it. But those main seasons, it showed really 3 things. It rarely showed the crime, which I thought was interesting in there. The first 2 minutes is the crime of that show. It's very cookie cutter show. So you get there's a dead body, you know, and you know, so you never see the crime in progress. You get to see everything after the crime. So you get to see the law side of it, where they're investigating the crimes, just like they say in the opening. These are the officers that investigate the crimes, and these are the prosecutors that prosecute it. You know, and that's exactly what they showed. They showed kind of that dynamic between law enforcement and that criminal justice system in terms of getting a successful prosecution and all the dynamics that go into that. So I really, really liked that. So all of the other shows I think are crap. Sorry, I can't.
The reason I asked is just the way that you string sentences together reminds me of Detective Ryan from Castle. And I'm a huge Castle nerd.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like,
oh no. The way I string sentences together is because I don't. I have some speech issues, so I have to think before I say. The way I usually talk is not the way I talk to you guys right now. You've heard a little bit, so sometimes my accent comes out. I usually have to filter out all the cuss words, and so I have a lot of pauses in between the things that I say.
So I'm wondering, over the last several years, through the university and patrol and so forth, have you noticed any difference in the compliance and non-compliance of the people that you interact with? Yeah,
we're really starting to see that now. In past years, not so much. In the specific circumstances that I was in and that we had to deal with, compliance was really based more on intoxication levels, more than anything else. So, but now we're really starting to see more of an acceptance to de-escalation, even with people under the influence, quite a bit. So where we go there and we're like, hey, can't do that, you know? And as long as you go into it in a nice kind of human way and just kind of lay it down there, people are much more receptive to that than coming in there and what we would call being badge heavy with it. Give you a quick example. I had to pull somebody over the other day, which is not something that a sheriff really does a whole often. So the whole county goes nuts when they hear me call my badge number over the radio. Like, what is this guy doing? You know, we have a technical college in our town, Wyotech, that's the automotive college. So there's this silly kid that comes around one of the busy intersections on his ATV, and he's doing a side wheelie, and it happens to be like smack dab right in front of me while I'm there. So light him up. And of course, he doesn't have a mirror on his ATV, and he's cranking that thing real loud so he can't hear or see anything. So I have to follow him for like 9 blocks. And I know he can't see me, so I'm not trying to kick off a pursuit or anything like that. But I finally beep at him. He goes over, and I always kind of make that decision beforehand. You know, I'm pretty hard and fast on my traffic stops. You're either getting a ticket or you're getting a lecture, not both. So I'm trying to change behavior. If I don't think your behavior is going to be able to change right off the bat, you're going to get a ticket. If I can change your behavior by just talking to you a little bit, then that's the best way to go. So talk to the kid, you know, and I was like, all right, dude, like, you're getting a warning, and here's the reasons why, you know, you shouldn't be popping wheelies and showing off for your friends. You know, I don't necessarily want to scrape you off the side of the highway on there, you know, just for being dumb. So, or trying to show off, and you know, that a lot of the times, you know, especially for kind of kids that age, they'd be like, oh, okay, dad, you know, that type of thing. So the kid was like, you know what, you're right, I was dumb, I'm not going to do it again. I'm like, thank you, that's why I do this, really, you know. And he was pretty cool. He was like, you know, I really appreciate you coming in. He's like, obviously this interaction doesn't feel good, and I wish it didn't have to happen. And I said, me too. So, but you know, in the past, you may not have gotten that. So,
Are you seeing many, let's say, big city cops, you know, who are burning out from the crap that they have to deal with politically and on the job, that want to get out? Are you seeing many of them come looking for rural opportunities, A, and B, if they do, are you interested?
yes, cautiously. So we see a lot of them, and I'm just cautiously, I'm cautious with anybody who's laterally transferring on there. So, like I said, it is one of those things that I micromanage highly. I wouldn't even say micromanage. I literally manage it myself. We go through a lengthy background check process to figure out why, you know, why are they coming? Like I said, not everybody tells you 100% of the story. So you got to take a look into that. There's this saying that says one man's trash is another man's treasure. I don't believe in that. One man's trash is another man's trash. So I'm not looking to add trash onto my department. So, but I am open to take somebody's treasures. So,
Do you find that there's a high trash level?
yes. Most of the people I weed out in background checks are lateral transfers.
Yeah.
Brand new person off the street, meets the minimum requirements, doesn't have, you know, any type of bad background or criminal background, or even just minor little misdemeanors like speeding ticket, like a DUI 15 years ago, something along those lines, where they've shown that they've rehabilitated. I can grab those people day in, day out, train them to be good deputies. So most of the people I weed out come from other departments.
Maybe you could give the quick backstory of Derek Cullen.
So, our officer involved shooting that we had, local kid from Laramie. His dad is a now retired highway patrolman, but was a highway patrolman at the time. Moved to Las Vegas and became a police officer with Las Vegas Metro, and got into 3 different incidences. 1, police shooting that was justified. 2, police shooting, I believe either of a juvenile or a teenager, justified. 3rd incident, went and used excessive use of force on some juveniles, removing them from a house, and was recorded doing it, and then physically assaulted the person doing the recording. You can see it on YouTube. So fired from the Las Vegas Police Department. Comes back home and comes to the land of second opportunities, which happened to be the Albany County Sheriff's Office at the time. Gets a job there. Kind of a big deal. He had a pretty substantial public record of use of force, questionable use of force, and then obviously getting fired for excessive use of force in Las Vegas. So camps are split on that in Laramie, where half the people are like, oh, deserves a second chance, hometown kid would be great. Other people are like, hey, past behavior dictates future performance. Went a number of years, did a really good job, and then gets an officer involved shooting that's pretty questionable. So yeah, that's kind of that background with that, you know, triggers off a federal lawsuit right off the bat. And I can't stress this enough. Past behavior dictates future performance.
If you can, I'd be curious to hear about the most difficult call you've sort of been on, you know, throughout your career, not just as sheriff.
Every death notification that I have to give is pretty difficult. Most of those are for suicide. So, and those never ever get easy. Child sex assault investigations are the worst. Sex assault investigations and domestic violence investigations are just terrible in general. When you're investigating a perpetrator of those crimes, again, they don't tell you everything. But one thing I will generalize on most of those perpetrators is they can't wait to tell you everything else. It's pretty disgusting. And if you can get a good rapport with them, they will tell you a lot. And it's good that you get justice for the survivor of that. God, the shit you have to sit through and listen to. This is gross. Gross. So,
You get many drug and gang issues?
no. I mean, for Wyoming, we say we have a ton of drugs. It's really only about 6% of our crimes. So it's still an issue because the drugs that we have to deal with now are fentanyl, number one, and then opioids are highly, highly, highly addictive and highly fatal. And so it's a big issue. Marijuana, you know, we're along the I-80 corridor. You guys are familiar with I-80. It's Lincoln's Highway, and it goes from sea to shining sea. And it's a main drug thoroughfare on there. So we pull a lot of loads off of the freeway quite a bit. So, but like I said, the drugs, we look at it more of a medical issue than anything else, especially those highly addictive opioids. And that is one of those system down changes. If we can start to, from the top down, to really start to better regulate opioids quite a bit, that'll help out in a lot of areas.
Yeah, but how often do you see cases where you're having to arrest someone and put them in the system and you wish that you could get them help instead? because, you know, like, a lot of crimes, especially drug related and alcohol related, come from a place of that person being in a really bad place in their life. How does that not just like wear your compassion so thin that you're burned out within a year or two?
It does a little bit. What we've done is try and look at it. We've really tried to change that culture to where we look at it as a medical situation. Half the people in my jail have a mental health issue. Half the people in my jail have a substance abuse issue, and half of them have both. And I know that math doesn't map out, but it's true. And so we've really tried to institute. We know that if we can treat the substance abuse issue, the crime will go away. So we have we're lucky in Albany County because we have a lot of different, what we call alternative courts, where we can send people to drug court, get them the treatment that they need. And that's not necessarily kind of your traditional court where you get sentenced to jail or prison or something along those lines as well. So a lot of mental health things, not only involved in the jail and our criminal justice system, but we're building those systems now too, to where, like I said, if we can treat the mental health issue, then we automatically treat the criminal justice issue. And for both of those, we treat it more permanently. Yeah. Substance abuse is harder because we know people are going to fall off the wagon, whatever wagon that they're on. But we know that, you know, if we can start to get them treatment, they have a better chances of a successful outcome.
You mentioned the I-80 corridor. Where does the intel come from when you stop the truck that's trying to?
Sometimes, so we have I have task force agents that work with our state Division of Criminal Investigation, so we get intel from them as well. A lot of the times we're just kind of, I don't want to say randomly finding it, but we're randomly finding it. Somebody blows a stop sign. It smells like weed. They've got 4 suitcases back. You know, they're in a rental car and one guy's like, hey, we're going to Arizona. The other guy's like, oh, we're heading to Louisiana. Which one is it? And why does it smell like marijuana? So those types of things. So, or, you know, like I said, you know, if you guys ever heard of Biggie Smalls' rap of the 10 cracked commandments, they got high on their own supply. It's a DUI. So.
Well, Sheriff, thank you so much.